All right, time for part 3 of our pre-Columbian civilization flipped classroom notes. This time we're going to start talking about the Aztecs. You guys have received a worksheet that looks like this on the right-hand side of your screen. Fill in the blanks as you go along, and I will have the presentation starting now. Section 1, the rise of the Aztecs. Some of the best farmland in Mexico is found in the highlands basin of central Mexico. A geographic basin is a bowl-shaped area, often with a lake at the bottom. The Aztecs built their empire here in a large high basin called the Valley of Mexico. The land in the Valley of Mexico is fertile, with shallow lakes, and the climate was mild. Around 1200, nomadic groups of different tribes began migrating to the valley. The last to arrive were called the Mexica, which were later to be called the Aztecs. At first, the local people considered the Aztecs barbarians and drove them away. Eventually, the Aztecs settled on a small island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. This is where, according to legend, they saw the eagle perched on a thorny cactus eating a snake that had been predicted in a prophecy. They were told to settle in such a place, and when they saw it, it became the place that they would settle and build their empire. The eagle and the cactus are now the national symbol of Mexico and can be found on the flag. The Aztecs founded their island settlement in 1325 and called it Tenochtitlan. By this time, the Aztec had gained a reputation as fierce warriors. It was a huge warrior culture, and they often served as mercenaries for other tribes. Mercenaries are soldiers for hire. The Aztecs, however, believed that they were destined to become powerful in their own right. The Aztecs' island setting had many advantages. The lake and its marshes were rich in terms of the food and resources, and the edges of the lake were ideal for farming. The Aztecs also created floating gardens called chinampas in the lake itself. These allowed the Aztecs to expand the island and feed their growing population. The island setting made travel, transportation, and defense easy because it was really hard for anyone to invade going across that water without being spotted. In the early 1400s, the Aztecs joined forces with two other city-states in an agreement called the Triple Alliance. By 1440, they controlled most of the Valley of Mexico. In the early 1500s, under Emperor Montezuma, the Aztec Empire reached its height. It covered much of present-day central Mexico and part of coastal Guatemala and was populated with about 10 million inhabitants. Section 2, Aztec Society. The Aztecs were mainly an agrarian people. This means that most of their lives were related to farming. The Aztecs were divided into two main classes, nobles and commoners. Nobles made from 5 to 10% of the population, and they could trace their family history back to the first Aztec king. They lived very well, never needed anything that they did not already have, and usually served, as far as their jobs go, as government officials. The commoners lived simpler lives. Although most were farmers, others held respected positions as artisans and traders. The lowest level of society were the slaves. Some were commoners who sold themselves into slavery to escape poverty or avoid punishment. Others were captives taken in war by other tribes that they had already conquered. And most Aztec slaves could marry and own property. They were given rights. The children were born free, and it was not a generation after generation state of slavery. And they could purchase their freedom after they could eventually afford it. Despite class differences, life for most Aztecs followed similar patterns. All children attended school for at least a few years. Boys received military training and girls learned homemaking. And teachers were highly respected. The Aztecs frequently waged war to win something called tribute, which are goods or natural resources paid as taxes by conquered people. Money was not part of the tribute. Like the Maya and the Inca, the Aztecs had no money system. Instead, their tribute included food, land, slaves, or other goods. Capturing prisoners for human sacrifice was another important motive for going to war. A king led the Aztecs. He was a member of the royal family, but he was selected by a council of nobles. A group of 5 royal advisors helped run the government. 4 were military commanders. The 5th was an official much like a prime minister, or a chief official appointed as the ruler of a nation. Lesser officials, such as judges and tax collectors, had more specific jobs. At the local level, citizens were divided into smaller districts called capuli, which were led by district chiefs. Although the Aztecs were led by a strong ruler, the empire never had a true central government. Instead, it had different city-states that were controlled by the Aztecs, who maintained through military force. Government and religion were also closely linked for the Aztecs, like many pre-Columbian societies. Monarchs, which were kings, ruled with the blessings of the gods, and the Aztecs believed that the gods gave them life and controlled everything on earth. They worshipped hundreds of gods, again another polytheistic society. One important Aztec god was Tlaloc, the rain god. Most important, though, was the ancient god. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name, because he brought success in battle and kept the sun in the sky. The Aztecs believed that he needed human blood to keep him strong. As a result, the Aztecs conducted human sacrifice on a massive scale, thousands of victims every year. Sacrifice was also a form of political control used to terrify the conquered people so they'd be easier to control. Think about it this way. If the people in government power, the ones telling you to do stuff, are sacrificing and killing thousands of people in front of your own face, you're probably going to listen to them. In some instances, the Aztecs forced defeated rulers to witness the sacrifice of their soldiers. Still, revolts were common among conquered people, which fed a constant cycle of war, sacrifice, and tribute. Section 3, Aztec Achievements. The Aztecs were skilled artists, architects, and engineers. They made beautiful objects from gold, quetzal feathers, and other natural resources. They also designed and built extraordinary capital city. Few structures survived the Spanish conquest, but scholars have used historical accounts and archaeological remains to depict the Aztec capital at its height. By the early 1500s, 200,000 people lived in Tenochtitlan. The city was divided into 4 quarters, crossed by avenues and canals. Long causeways connected the islands to the lakeshore. A causeway is a raised road across a body of water. At the center of the city was a large walled public plaza that contained dozens of pyramids, temples, and other buildings. Facing the plaza on one side was the emperor's palace. As you can imagine, the fact that causeways were the only way on and off an island made it a little bit difficult for the Aztecs to evacuate when the Spaniards started to attack. The largest structure was a huge, brightly painted pyramid called the Templo Mayor. 2 shrines stood at the top of the pyramid. A shrine is a place of worship dedicated to a sacred object or person. The residential districts of the city, where people lived, were spread out around the plaza. Each district had its own small temples and markets. In the markets, numerous products were available, from food and medicine to live animals and building materials. The Aztecs used cacao beans, cotton cloth, gold dust, and copper as substitutes for money. Basic craft goods such as baskets, pottery, and sandals were available in the markets. Luxury goods, however, were sold directly to the nobles. Today, collectors view these luxury goods as fine art or works that are created to be admired. Gold and silver jewelry and mosaics were specialties of the Aztecs. One of the highest forms of Aztec art, however, was featherwork. Fans, headdresses, capes, and shields were made from feathers of tropical birds. The Aztecs also carved beautiful stone sculptures, such as the 25-ton Aztec calendar stone. The Aztecs also highly valued words and language. They created a beautiful bark paper book similar to the Maya. The Aztec writing system was less advanced than the Maya system, so these books were mainly lists of names and dates. Their written language was important for record keeping, but it was their spoken language that mattered most to the Aztecs. The Aztecs were skilled orators, or public speakers, much like you guys after your public speaking and debate units. One of the Aztec emperor's titles was Tatahuani, which means guest speaker. Orators performed at both public and private gatherings. Their favorite topics were stories from the past and legends of the gods. A great speaker was said to have flowers on his lips. Even today, the Aztec language, Nahuatl, is known for its beautiful sound. It means elegant speech. Poetry was the most popular form of Aztec literature. Poets were highly respected in Aztec society. Even kings composed poetry. The most famous of the royal poets were those guys, the great ruler of Texcoco. Flowers and beauty of nature were classic themes of Aztec poetry. Will I leave only this, like the flowers that wither? Will nothing last in my name? Nothing of my fame here on earth? At least flowers, at least songs. That's an example of Aztec poetry. The Maya, Inca, and Aztecs were all advanced medieval civilizations that adapted well to their environments. Each civilization developed architectural techniques and agricultural systems that made use of their available resources and are still in use to this day. All three created sophisticated cultural, economic, and social systems that made life for their citizens prosperous and secure.